Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're on the road in San Diego, California. The White House was rocked by yet another major scandal Tuesday after the New York Times reported President Trump personally asked FBI Director James Comey to end the agency's investigation into Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn. The Times reports Trump made the extraordinary request to Comey during an Oval Office meeting February 14th, one day after Trump fired Flynn for lying both publicly and privately about his contacts with Russian officials. Trump reportedly asked Vice President Mike Pence and Attorney General Jeff Sessions to leave the room before making the request to Comey, saying, quote, "I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He's a good guy. I hope you can let this go," end quote. The Times based its report on two sources who cited a memo written by then FBI Director Comey after the meeting. On Tuesday night, Jason Chaffetz, the Republican chair of the House Oversight Committee, called on the FBI to turn over all memoranda, notes, summaries, and recordings of discussions between Trump and Comey. The revelation came 1 week after Trump fired Comey amidst reports that the FBI director was seeking additional resources for his probe into possible ties between Russia and the Trump Organization. The report bolstered evidence that the president may have committed the crime of obstruction of justice. Speaking from the Senate floor, New York Democrat and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer told his colleagues history is watching.
Concerns about our national security, the rule of law, the independence of our nation's highest law enforcement agencies are mounting. The country is being tested in unprecedented ways. I say to all of my colleagues in the Senate, history is watching.
The ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff of California, said Comey should return to Capitol Hill to testify and promised to subpoena all relevant materials. Meanwhile, the New York Times also is reporting President Trump asked James Comey during the February 14th Oval Office meeting to consider imprisoning journalists who report on leaks of classified information. In a statement, Bruce Brown of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press wrote, quote, "No president gets to jail journalists. Reporters are protected by judges and juries, by a Congress that relies on them to stay informed, and by a Justice Department that for decades has honored the role of a free press by spurning prosecutions of journalists for publishing leaks of classified information," he said. The New York Times has reported Israel was the source of highly classified intelligence that President Trump reportedly disclosed to Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak at the White House last week. At a Tuesday news conference, National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster sought to minimize damage from Trump's disclosure.
A yes or no question here. Did the president share classified information with the Russians in that meeting?
And as I mentioned already, we don't say what's classified, what's not classified. What I will tell you again is that what the president shared was wholly appropriate.
Russian President Vladimir Putin offered this morning to share with the U.S. Congress a recording of the Oval Office meeting between Trump, Foreign Minister Lavrov, and Russian Ambassador Kislyak. It's not clear whether such a recording exists. During the meeting, the Trump administration barred all U.S. media while allowing a photographer from the Russian state media agency TASS inside the Oval Office. The mounting White House scandals have led some lawmakers to openly discuss impeaching President Trump. On Monday, Texas Democratic Congressman Al Green said Trump should be removed from office for obstructing the FBI's investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 election. Congressmembers Maxine Waters of California, Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, Keith Ellison of Minnesota, and other House Democrats have also raised the possibility of impeachment, as has Maine Independent Senator Angus King, who spoke Thursday evening with CNN's Wolf Blitzer.
If these allegations, Senator, are true, are we getting closer and closer to the possibility of yet another impeachment process?
Reluctantly, Wolf, I have to say yes, simply because obstruction of justice is such a serious offense.
President Trump welcomed Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan to the White House on Tuesday, praising the authoritarian leader and promising to continue supplying Turkey with U.S. weapons. Erdogan praised Trump's election victory as a legendary triumph while objecting to the administration's decision to arm Syrian Kurdish forces and the YPG militia. Erdogan also repeated his demand that the U.S. extradite Fethullah Gulen, a Turkish dissident living in the Poconos in Pennsylvania, whom Erdogan blames for leading a failed coup attempt in 2016. After Tuesday's White House meeting, members of President Erdogan's security detail attacked a peaceful protest held by anti-Erdogan protesters outside the Turkish ambassador's residence in Washington, D.C. Video of the incident shows men in suits punching and kicking protesters carrying the flag of the Kurdish YPG party. 9 people were hurt, with 2 of the protesters hospitalized with serious injuries. Police made 2 arrests. In breaking news from Afghanistan, gunmen armed with explosives have stormed the offices of the national television and radio station in Jalalabad. At least 2 people have been killed and more than a dozen wounded. Officials warn the numbers of casualties is expected to rise. In Iraq, the journalistic monitoring group Air Wars reports a U.S.-led coalition airstrike in Mosul flattened a civilian home Monday, killing 8 members of a single family. The reported airstrike killed resident Al-Hajj Allah al-Safi, his wife, mother, sons, brother, and sister-in-law. In Kansas, imprisoned Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning walked free from Fort Leavenworth prison this morning after spending 7 years behind bars for leaking more than 700,000 classified files and videos to WikiLeaks about U.S. foreign policy and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Manning was sentenced to 35 years in prison in 2013 after she was convicted under the World War I-era Espionage Act. In January, President Obama commuted her sentence shortly before leaving office. Manning is already the longest-held whistleblower in U.S. history. Meanwhile, Puerto Rican independence activist Oscar Lopez Rivera is set to be freed today after 35 years in prison, much of the time spent in solitary confinement. In February, Lopez Rivera was transferred to a prison in Puerto Rico to serve the remainder of a sentence. He's slated to return to Chicago Thursday, where he'll be welcomed in a celebration featuring U.S. lawmakers of Puerto Rican descent, including Congress members Luis Gutierrez and Roberto Maldonado. In Mexico, hundreds of journalists protested outside the Interior Ministry Tuesday to demand an end to the violence against reporters and media workers. The protest was held only hours after the funeral of award-winning journalist Javier Valdez, who was killed by gunmen on Monday. Another journalist, Sonia Cordova, was also shot and wounded Monday in a separate attack that left her son dead. On Tuesday, multiple digital Mexican media outlets also went on a 24-hour strike, refusing to publish anything but a black banner with information about assassinated journalists. This is award-winning journalist Carmen Aristigui speaking at the protest in Mexico City.
For us, Valdez has been converted into an emblematic case. The death of Javier Valdez should imply deep things for us. Javier Valdez and all the others who have lost their lives on this path should be a driving force for us. No to the silence, no to the self-censorship, no to the fear. Here we all have courage to keep informing, keep reporting, keep investigating, keep denouncing, keep sharing opinions, and speak out, speak out, speak out.
In Britain, Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn Tuesday rolled out his party's manifesto ahead of a general election set for next month. The platform proposes raising taxes on corporations and the wealthiest 5% of earners. The revenue would go towards improving universal health care, an end to public university tuition, free childcare, housing subsidies, expanded workers' rights, and other programs. This is Jeremy Corbyn speaking on Tuesday.
Because people want a country run for the benefit of the many, not the few. That's because for the last 7 years, our people have lived through the opposite. A Britain for the rich and the elite and the vested interests.
Back in the United States, a federal judge in Mississippi has sentenced a Gulfport man to 49 years in prison for murdering a transgender teenager in the first-ever hate crime prosecution involving a transgender victim. Joshua Valum, who pleaded guilty in 2015 to killing 17-year-old Mercedes Williamson, was sentenced under the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. In a statement, Attorney General Jeff Sessions praised the sentencing, even though then-Senator Sessions voted against the hate crimes bill in 2009. Williamson was one of at least 21 transgender people murdered in the U.S. in 2015. So far this year, at least 10 transgender people have been murdered nationwide. In Georgia, a Panamanian immigrant has reportedly committed suicide in ICE custody after he was held 19 days in solitary confinement. Federal authorities say they found 27-year-old Gene Jimenez Joseph unresponsive with a sheet around his neck early Monday morning at the Stewart Detention Center south of Columbus. Human rights advocacy group Project South told Democracy Now!, quote, "The suicide of this young immigrant at Stewart is a horrific tragedy that could have been prevented," unquote. Stewart can hold more than 1,700 people and is run by Core Civic, the private prison company formerly known as Corrections Corporation of America. A year-long investigation found deplorable conditions at the facility and lack of adequate access to mental health care. Court records show judges there order more deportations than anywhere else in the country. Critics call it the black hole of the immigration system and have called for its closure. In more news from Georgia, prison officials killed 45-year-old death row prisoner J.W. Ledford with a lethal dose of the barbiturate pentobarbital early Wednesday after the U.S. Supreme Court rejected a challenge to the method of the execution. Lawyers argue there was a high risk the injection would not render Ledford fully unconscious, exposing him to an unconstitutionally cruel and unusual death. The High Court rejected that motion and denied Ledford's request to be executed by firing squad. And in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, civil rights attorney Larry Krasner is positioned to become Philadelphia's next district attorney after overwhelmingly winning the Democratic primary Tuesday. Krasner's represented protesters with Black Lives Matter, ACT UP, Occupy Philadelphia, and other progressive groups. He's a longtime opponent of capital punishment who's promised never to seek the death penalty. Krasner opposes police stop-and-frisk policies and told The Intercept he hopes to create a team that'll investigate and prosecute police and public officials for abuses. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're on the road in San Diego, California.